Good morning. So I was spectating an old friend earlier, and I remembered he always used to praise my 5-tick Xarpus. And I remembered because when I was spectating after they killed Sode, he started PMing me about being washed up at Xarpus and not having the cheat client crutch anymore. And I thought he was just memeing. He was not. It was funny to see, and we both laughed about it, but it gave me some motivation to make this video a bit sooner than I had planned. So yeah, today's going to be about 5-ticking Xarpus. It's a skill most people used to not really have to learn very well, and I guess it's understandable that some people had never really thought about the room other than click on 2. If you know, you know. However, since cheat clients actually got the banhammer, it doesn't seem unreasonable to explain my Xarpus method in a lot more detail than used to be necessary. Keep in mind that performing this method can seem complex at first, and you'll have to learn to understand the cycle. This is advanced stuff, so give it some time if you struggle. To make this video as complete as I can, let me take it all the way back to the beginning. The term 5-ticking comes from the tick perfect scythe melee method. The scythe is a 5-tick weapon, hence 5-ticking. 5-ticking is not to be confused with 5.3 ticking, also known as 4-ticking. 5.3 and 4-ticking is actually the same method. I know it's a bit confusing, but there is a reason there's two names for the same method. The reason is because people call it depending on their perspective of the room. Let me explain that. Xarpus attacks on a 4-tick cycle and targets your current tile as he fires the attack. That means if you leave the tile, the attack is still going to where you were when he fired. This means that you can pick which tile to rag by moving there before he spits. This turned into a technique where you would step back every 4 ticks to rag the outside tiles rather than the front. From this perspective, it's pretty reasonable to call it 4-ticking. However, technically, your scythe misses a tick once every 4 step backs. This essentially turns your scythe into a 5.3 tick weapon, hence the term 5.3 ticking. You can see how they're the same thing through different perspectives. If I'd have to pick, I think 5.3 is more technically correct, while 4-ticking is easier to say, so I'm just going to call it 4-ticking. Personally, I don't really care what people call it because it's shit anyway. What we are going to do is proper 5-ticking. Now, I'm going to be honest, you need to learn 4-ticking first, so let's talk about that super quickly. Like I said before, 4-ticking is when you do a step back every 4 ticks. This is what most people do for Versic P2. Don't worry if you don't, it's pretty easy. First, you want to turn on all the game sounds that aren't music. Then, you stand up close with Xarpus and listen for a kind of spitting sound. This sound cue is the indication for when you click to the outside. Hover your mouse over the tile that you want to step back to. Wait for the sound, and as soon as you hear it, you click. Then you click back on Xarpus. That's it. Good work. In order to 5-tick... Okay, hold up, that's not entirely it. You should reuse the same tile a few times until you see a projectile coming. You also need to take extra care when going around corners. But that is pretty much it. I suggest, if you don't know this method yet, that you go practice it and come back to the rest of the video later. Trust me, it's going to get a lot more difficult to understand if you don't. After you've been 4-ticking for a while, you start to notice a pattern. Sometimes your scythe hits right away. Then, on the next step back, it attacks sort of in the middle. The next hit goes off as you run away from him, and then you almost feel like you miss a hit. You don't actually miss an entire hit, but you do temporarily cancel your attack by moving away. Since you click straight back on the boss, you only lose 1 tick, but this happens quite often during a single Xarpus. That tick loss per cycle is what we're going to remove. 5-ticking is about being tick perfect and not lose that tick. So how do we do that? Well, simply put, we're not going to click away on that tick. But, you might ask, won't you rag the front tile that way? You sure do. So, in order not to make a big mess and wreck the entire front row, we're going to do it in a controlled way. Instead of ragging the front tile that you use while floor ticking, we're going to move to a tile that's more out of the way and rag that instead. Yes, you're still ragging a front tile, but we're going to recycle it for the entire duration of the room and have only one rag tile by the end of it. That's not so bad, especially if you consider all those juicy ticks you're gaining. Earlier I explained that you lose one tick per cycle. By cycle, I mean a full rotation as I described earlier. You step in and instantly hit Xarpus, then you attack in the middle, then you attack while running away, and then you miss that tick. If you then continue for ticking, this is where the cycle starts repeating, and you hit as you go in. While for ticking, each cycle has 3 hits and one, I'm gonna call it miss. To 5 tick, you need to be able to recognize where you are in the cycle. Recognizing you're on the last hit before the miss is essential to being prepared to perform the controlled rag. Let me show you. I chose this clip because it starts at the beginning of a cycle as I described. I went in for 1, step back, 2, and this attack is in the middle. Now we're at 3, and you can see I hit as I move away. And next up will be the miss, or the 5 tick. In this case, the 5 tick rag. So I've shown you what to look for, that third hit, and I've also shown you how to recognize it. Your scythe hit goes off while moving back. The next question then is, okay, I know what to look for, but what do I do? So this question doesn't have a perfect answer. This is partly up to preference, but I can show you what I like to do, and I can show you what works. Okay, so imagine this. You're casually four-ticking, paying attention to that third hit specifically. While clicking back to an outside tile, you notice your scythe hit goes off as you move away. Your character is already moving to the outside tile that you clicked, and you're going to let that happen. At this very moment, you have 3 ticks before his next attack. This means you have 3 ticks to get to what I like to call a destination tile. The destination tile is basically one of 3 tiles that you can choose, from which if you click Xarpus, you attack him the very next tick on the intentionally ragged tile, if your scythe is off cooldown. It's very important that you understand that sentence, so run it back a few times if you have to. Here comes the preference part. Some people like to use different tiles to rag. Personally, I recommend ragging a middle tile. The other option is to rag a corner tile, which takes away 3 outside tiles to 4-tick to. I like to keep my corner clean, and so the middle tile has to go. Next, I want to talk about how to get to the destination tile. Since you have 3 ticks and sometimes only have 1 tile to move, you can imagine people come up with the wildest zigzag maneuvers that look fancy and intimidating to learn. Just stick to getting there for now, and once you learn the cycle, you can spice it up if you want. What I'm basically saying is, after stepping back on that third hit, simply click one of the 3 destination tiles and wait for your scythe to come off cooldown. I recommend starting with the destination tile 1 tile away from Xarpus, basically in the middle. From this tile, you can still hear Xarpus while not having to stand in the ragged poison tile. I mentioned that you can still hear him from this tile because his sound effect is actually a really useful tool for your timing. Normally, you use the spitting sound to click back, but on the 5-tick rag, you actually want to click Xarpus instead when you hear it. If you take a second to think about it, that'll make sense. The 5-tick is an intentional rag, so you want to be up close to him on his attack tick, rather than further away like normal. Okay, so let's take a look from the start of a cycle again. We already hit once, that's twice, so next is our third, which means we should start thinking about a destination tile. If we run that back to before the third hit and look at it in slow-mo, you can see that instead of clicking the destination tile right away, I click Xarpus so I get dragged close to him before I click to the destination tile. If you think about it, had I clicked the destination tile right away, I would have walked over the outside poison tile and taken some damage. This way, I avoid the damage and still have plenty of time to get where I need to go. I recommend learning this method. After the 5-tick rag, you have loads of time to get back to an outside tile. If you then attack Xarpus from an outside tile, when your scythe comes off cooldown, you're back at the start of a cycle. If you manage to loop this, good work, you're 5-ticking. Now then, before we get to the fun part, there's one more thing we need to talk about. Xarpus P3, also known as the post-screech or simply screech. This one is pretty hard to explain, but I think I found a way to make it sort of understandable. It is okay to skip this part until you're much better at Xarpus and play it safe instead. So there's a cycle that you need to memorize, like you memorized vocab in high school. 2-2-1-2-1. 2-2-1-2-1. This is the cycle you can scythe Xarpus in respective corners after the screech. 2 scythes, 2 scythes, 1 scythe, 2 scythes, 1 scythe, repeat. However, you're not always on that specific phase of the cycle, so you need to find where you are as soon as possible after the screech. First of all, unless the screech happens on your 5-tick, you always have 2 more hits before he stares. I'll come back to that scenario in a minute. Depending on where you are in the cycle, you then need to adjust the 2-2-1-2-1 to whichever part of the cycle you're at. Unfortunately, I haven't found a comprehensive rule of thumb to help you recognize the cycles. I literally just do it on feeling, and I know that's a horrible explanation. It's not even an explanation, but that's all I got. You need to develop a similar gut feeling. The only help I can give for getting into the cycle is by intentionally losing a tick. If you watch him turn and click him right away as he turns away, you'll be 1 tick late into the cycle, which basically puts you on the 2-1-2-2-1 repeat cycle. For the tick perfect method, I honestly have no idea how to do it. I have no idea how I do it. So there's one last scenario when he screeches while your next attack is the 5-tick rag. In this case, if you rag, he will turn on the same tick as your scythe comes off cooldown. This means you'll have to gamble or lose ticks. Anyway, we're not risking our lives every 4th Xarp, so we need a fix. Fortunately, the fix is pretty easy. You just claw spec or scratch instead of that 5-tick rag. That way you steal a tick and get on a good cycle. That is about as comprehensive as I can make it. If you didn't get this part, just come back another day or learn it through YOLOing. This is very mechanical, and I don't blame you if you don't care enough. Finally, I'm going to talk about adding some spice. There's no benefit other than weird flex points, which I'm a big collector of. Let's take a look back at the previous example. If you think about the path I took, I might as well have gone through the outside instead, since that path is the same distance. This example is to show that it really doesn't matter how you get to the destination tile, as long as you get there in time. You could get there tile by tile, or in a zigzag pattern, or what I like to do is through the outside and the longest distance I can find. If you get creative, Xarpus can be really fun and satisfying. That's it for today's video though. I hope you learned something, and more importantly, I hope I helped make Xarpus fun to you guys, even off client. This video took me a while to record and edit because I suck, and I don't even know what to say about the drawings. Well, this was fun, and as always, thanks for watching.